Whenever I first started reading, I did not like reading. Like, I'll be honest, I was always one of those kids who honestly just never liked reading, and I just thought reading wasn't for me. I thought it was one of those things that I would never get into because I mean, first of all, I really thought I was dyslexic for the longest time because every time I read a book, it's like it would go through one ear and come out the other ear, and I would just never be able to retain anything. And later on, I just figured out I genuinely just didn't like the books we were reading. So whenever I actually first started seriously reading, like the first book I ever read was actually Matthew McConaughey's Greenlight. It was a book like it's really just a book about Matthew McConaughey's life. You don't know who that is. He's an actor. And after that, like when I actually started picking up books that I can genuinely learn something from, that was whenever I seriously like began like just reading and reading and reading. And over the course of 2023, I read over 12 books. And so I kind of think it's out of the 12 books, I picked out a few of them, and so a few books I've started reading now that I think honestly will actually help you out some. So, first book, one of the first books I actually read was How to Win Friends and Influence Others. It's by Dale Carnegie. The book really just talks about a lot of just like social skills and how to actually be like genuinely just a good person in conversation. Because I've always been a really socially awkward person like that. I've just always been that way. Always been that one person who just walks around. I never really had a whole lot of confidence growing up, and I think this book opened me up because with COVID, a lot of like the social skills I did have really dissipated just simply because we didn't have those interactions and everybody who I talked to was online, and it's just so easy to talk to people online rather than in person. And this will kind of open me up into how to actually conversate with people, how to talk better, and just like genuinely how to build trust in a person. This is like one of the first books you're going to see for anybody recommend because it is seriously a really good book. If you actually take the time, don't worry about finishing the book and just actually the steps that he says, you constantly use them. Like for instance, I will tell you a chapter, like one of my favorite ones. I'm trying to find it. So, an easy way to become a good conversationalist. Really, he just talks about, if I'm correct, he really just talks about just listening. Yeah. Be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. This could literally just be you talk to a cash register and you mention, I don't know, their hair being like you really enjoy their hair, and you think about, oh, it must be a lot of work to take care of the hair. I think that's the example he talks about in there. But whenever you're really first talking to somebody, like try to encourage them to talk. Try to encourage them to speak about themselves because then they're going to like naturally trust you a little more. It's a wonderful book if you're trying to actually build yourself and you're trying to build trust within other people and you're trying to be just generally a better leader and a better communicator. So next book. Now, this book this is an interesting one. I didn't expect to put this on here. Was Sapiens. So Sapiens, it's a book by Yuval Harari, and he talks about like the history of humanity. And I just thought about it because first of all, I just like evolution. I like that kind of stuff in general. But something that you learn a lot of in here is that we share the same brains as our ancestors. And unironically, this book is actually really good for trying to live more aligned to how your ancestors live in the positive light. Like, for instance, he speaks a lot about the diet that they used to eat, which consisted of mostly meats and fruits. And using this, I actually used it with my own diet and started making my diet consist more of meats and fruits. And then this is where I actually noticed like an actual increase in my energy, an increase in my performance. And it's so ironic because the book is literally just about like our ancestors. It talks about how things change. It talks about just how like we've changed over time as people. And it's just a wonderful book talking about, you know, where we come from and how really we're not that different in a lot of ways to our ancestors. It's just a wonderful book. You learn a lot of stuff. You learn a lot about like the psychology of humans and like why we really think the way we do, where we started off from, and then how seriously we're not really that much happier than our ancestors, even though you think our life is easier. And real and you've probably heard it online of the saying that that hard times create hard men, and then hard men creates easier times, and then easier times creates soft men, and then soft men create hard times. And it's almost this paradox that this book honestly talks about a lot in some chapters. And he talks a lot about like the insight of like how we can move forward in a world where it's becoming relatively easy, and so the people have become relatively lazy because of that. So you kind of want to maintain a sort of like level of focus, a level of work ethic, even though it's so easy to just be lazy. But like I said, Sapiens, a really excellent book. I love this book. I've read it 2 times. So next book, and this is probably one of, if not my favorite books. You'll probably hear me talk about it all the time on the channel. Is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This book is honestly like reading this book changed my life in a lot of ways. I have an attachment to this book because if you don't know who Marcus Aurelius was, he was essentially this guy. He was this Roman emperor, and he wrote this book. It wasn't originally made. It was really a journal that he was writing to himself because he was he was a young ruler who had to lead the the greatest empire, like one of the greatest empires of all time, the Roman Empire. And it's really just a book talking to himself about like what a ruler ought to be, what a man ought to be, what a good man ought to be. And it's really like him instilling these lessons, and he opens up the book talking about the where he's learned these lessons from. He he mentions, and like he spends some time to cover some homage for these people who have actually influenced him. The first chapter, he just before he starts anything, he talks about why he's so grateful for these people who have given him this advice. And there's so many good moments in this book, so many good snippets. And I could sit here and read you so many parts of it because I highlighted so many parts of this book. It's a relatively cheap book. It's only 100 pages, but the stuff that's in here is absolutely gold. There's a reason why, like actually, like rulers in general, like you can look it up. So many rulers have actually read this book to become not only a good tactician, but just a good ruler in as a whole. Because Marcus Aurelius, he wrote this book almost as an accountability for his own self. He wrote this as a book to hold himself accountable for the position that he had as a husband, as a man, as a ruler, as a tactician. This book covers so much of vital information that he's learned of how to have mental toughness, how to keep your mind calm and collected, how to make decisions rationally. A lot of these problems that we have nowadays is simply because we don't believe in ourselves. We don't believe that we can do it. It's not that we don't have the ability for it. It's just we simply lack the ability that we believe it. And he talks a lot about the morality of human life, how how we're all going to come here, we're all going to die, and your fame and your wealth will diminish, it'll go away. That's not the thing you should care about because you cannot bring this money and these riches with you. You can't bring the fame with you. So what would you like to leave here? What would you like to know, like as a person? Because if you can't bring your fame, if you can't bring your wealth, if you can't bring all these things with you, it's good to leave as an honorable person. And so he even covers like so much stuff of like not only how to be a good ruler, but how to be a good parent and how to be a good person to the people around you. And it's just one of those books that like honestly it was just a game changer because like it almost opened my eyes into like the way a man ought to be. Like he was the person who said like stop like talking about like how a man should be and be that man. It's just an absolutely wonderful book. It's going to be a really it's it's only 100 pages, but a lot of the stuff that he talks about, I really think it'd be beneficial if you just spend some time to really think about it and ponder what does this mean? Like, what is he trying to say here? Because remember, he's writing this to himself. He wouldn't write this for other people. He wrote it to himself because he was trying to actively program his mind into becoming that person. And obviously he did. He was a magnificent ruler. Anyways, Meditation Marcus Aurelius is an absolutely lovely book. It's probably my favorite book that I've read over the course of 2023. Last book, and like I said, there's a lot of books. I could cover them, but it would be a really long video. In the future, I'll talk more about like all the books I've read, but this is really just to sum up some of the books that I think would be really beneficial for you to read. The last one, and this is a book that I recently just started reading, is Relentless by Tim Grover. So Tim Grover, if you don't know who that is, he is a he's a trainer who trained people like Kobe Bryant, Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan, a lot of these like really top-notch athletes. And he talks about how from all his experience, all of his collected experience of being a trainer, he talks about the type of mentalities that a lot of these trainers had. He talks about what what divided the people up from being good, being great, and being unstoppable. If you're watching this video, you probably don't feel like settling with just being good or just being great. You probably want to be unstoppable. You probably really want to be really good at what you do. And in this book, he kind of opens up on that part because he talks a lot about how that part of you that's unstoppable is already within you. It's just a matter of actually learning how to bring it out and actually accepting it coming out because it ends up being really difficult to let that part of you out because of the way that we're conditioned to be like really submissive and to always like the way that we grow up. It's always in a way that you just want to keep your head down and do what you're supposed to do. And this book kind of talks a lot about how to actually build not only the mental toughness but also just achieving like the goals and how to be just like I said unstoppable at what you do. To just like when I think of people like Kobe Bryant or like Michael Jordan, like you think of them as unstoppable people. These people that will just they are like the top, like they're the elites. And this book is gonna, if you're somebody who almost just feels kind of mediocre, if you're somebody who like doesn't feel confident about what you're doing and feeling like you're almost like there's like these open gaps between you and that one person that you wish to be like, then this book is going to help you like close those gaps that you have. It could be in your work, it could be in your lifting, it could be in your relationships. This book is going to be something that is going to take you to the next step if you actually actively, and this is a really important thing. Like I said, this goes for all the books, but especially with this book, is that you're going to have a lot of limited beliefs that are going to tell you, okay, I don't know about that. Like he's going to say a lot of things that are kind of that are kind of esocentric, and there's going to be things that like are not standard and not the norm that he's going to talk about. But seriously, if you just get rid of like what he talks about in the beginning of the book, just pour the glass that you have of your beliefs and actually just listen to what he's saying, and I can trust you that you're going to walk out with a stronger mentality if you actually listen to what he's saying, actually try to actively recall it, and then get rid of those previous beliefs that you had that you cannot do this. That's all I have for you. That's all I have for you. Like I said, these books are just a handful of books of many, many really good books that I got the opportunity to read. On another topic about reading in general that I think is honestly just really beautiful is the idea that normally whenever people make books, they make it because they genuinely want to help people. Because, there's only so much money you can spend on a book for people to buy it. Like for instance, Meditations, it only cost me about $5. And obviously Marcus Aurelius is dead, but that's not a good example. But normally books aren't that expensive. And the reason why people make books is because they genuinely want to give you knowledge of these ideas that they have learned. Books almost serve as a way of just like giving you giving you like the mistakes that people have made and the knowledge that they learned from the mistakes in a way that like really is just beneficial. It's it's just a way that's like it's really wonderfully put because you're just learning so much knowledge of other people who have lived their life and it's given to you. And you could be a young person watching this, you could be an old person, but there's always going to be something in a book that you learn. That's something that's absolutely wonderful about reading books is just learning about people's lives and learning of a different perspective than your own. Hardest things that like we face as people is we simply just don't have a direction. We don't have a way of actually making it to that thing because it's like we have like a vague goal, a vague idea of what it is, but a lot of the times, like I said, there's a lot of gaps, gaps in like our beliefs, gaps in our knowledge of a certain topic. And a lot of the times, like reading specific books, like for instance, reading these books is going to help you close those gaps. It's going to help you actually form like a better concept of what it means to be like an actually a good person, what it means to be a hardworking person, what it means to be just a social, more socially like a more social person in general. So before you go and buy these, hopefully you go and buy these books, or you go and try to like find PDFs of these books or just summaries. I'd really try to get into the habit of trying to be a better reader, and like this is formed from like really like slow reading. It's formed from actually writing down what you've learned and applying it to real life. So your actionable step is obviously like, okay, obviously like you could get one of the books, but I want you to, whenever you find something that genuinely like interests you, that like you think like, okay, I could honestly use that. Stop where you are, write it down, and seriously like try to use it in your life. That's the best way to actually apply the knowledge you learn in books. This isn't like a this isn't like how they teach you in school where you take a test and you never have to look at it again. It's something that you can genuinely use in the rest of your life. Like for instance, in how to win friends and influence others. Next time you go talk to somebody, go and actually just listen to them, encourage them to talk about their own life and with their own interests. This is going to help you a lot. Whenever you're reading these books, don't feel like if I just read the books, then all of a sudden I'll get all the knowledge. You have to slowly apply what they talk about in the books, and then you're actually going to be able to understand where they're coming from and apply it in your own life. That's all I have for you. And as always, you can look in the description if you want a one on call for fitness and if you want for fitness and dieting. That's all I have for you boys.